The divine encounter, the vast emptiness of space, stretched endlessly around the human exploration vessel, Horizon's Edge, as it drifted through the outer rim of the Andromeda sector. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge, her weathered hands clasped behind her back as she watched the stars through the main viewport. After 3 years of deep space exploration, she had grown accustomed to the silence and solitude that came with humanity's push into uncharted territories. "Captain, we're picking up some unusual readings ahead," called out Lieutenant Torres from the sensor station. His voice carried a note of confusion that immediately caught Chen's attention. In their years of exploration, they had encountered strange phenomena before, but something in the young officer's tone suggested this was different. Dr. Marcus Webb, the ship's xenobiologist and first contact specialist, looked up from his research station where he had been cataloging samples from their last planetary survey. His keen eyes reflected the curiosity that had driven him to volunteer for this mission into the unknown. "What kind of readings, Lieutenant?" "Energy signatures unlike anything in our databases, sir. They're massive, structured, and they seem to be artificial in nature." Torres manipulated his console, and the main screen filled with sensor data that made everyone on the bridge stop what they were doing. Commander Elena Bosques, the ship's tactical officer, moved closer to examine the readings. Her military training had taught her to be suspicious of anything that didn't fit established patterns. "Those energy levels are off the charts. Whatever's generating them would have to be the size of a small moon." Captain Chen studied the data with growing fascination. The readings showed massive structures ahead of them, but structures that seemed to violate several fundamental laws of physics. They appeared to be floating freely in space without any visible means of support, and the energy they were generating was more powerful than anything humanity had ever encountered. "Dr. Webb, what's your assessment?" Chen asked, knowing that the scientist's expertise would be crucial in determining their next course of action. Webb adjusted his glasses as he analyzed the incoming data. "Captain, these structures appear to be composed of materials that shouldn't be able to exist in this configuration. The gravitational fields alone should cause them to collapse, yet they're perfectly stable. If I didn't know better, I'd say we're looking at technology so advanced it might as well be magic." "There's no such thing as magic, Doctor," Commander Vasquez interjected, her hand instinctively moving toward her sidearm. "Just technology we don't understand yet." As the Horizon's Edge drew closer to the mysterious structures, their true scale became apparent. They were indeed the size of small moons, crafted from what appeared to be crystalline material that pulsed with inner light. Geometric patterns covered their surfaces, patterns that seemed to shift and change as they watched. "Captain, we're being scanned," Torres reported, his voice tight with tension. "The scanning beams are penetrating our shields like they're not even there." Before Chen could respond, the bridge was suddenly filled with a brilliant light that seemed to come from everywhere at once. When the light faded, they found themselves face to face with beings that defied description. They appeared humanoid, but were composed entirely of what looked like living energy, their forms constantly shifting between solid matter and pure light. The largest of these beings stepped forward, and when it spoke, its voice resonated directly in their minds rather than through their ears. "Mortal creatures, you have entered the domain of the eternal dominion. We are the gods of this galaxy, the architects of reality itself. You will kneel before our divine presence." Captain Chen felt the overwhelming psychic pressure that accompanied the being's words, a force that seemed designed to compel obedience through sheer mental dominance. Around her, she could see her crew struggling against the same pressure. their faces strained with effort. "I am Captain Sarah Chen of the human vessel Horizon's Edge," she said, her voice steady despite the incredible pressure bearing down on her mind. "We are explorers from Earth, seeking knowledge and peaceful contact with other intelligent species." The entity that had spoken seemed genuinely surprised by her response. "You resist our divine presence. This is impossible. We are the Eternal Dominion, the shapers of worlds, the masters of life and death. Every species in this galaxy has knelt before us for 10,000 years." Dr. Webb stepped forward, his scientific curiosity overriding his natural caution. "Forgive me, but could you explain what you mean by gods? In our experience, beings who claim divine status usually have very specific reasons for doing so." The beings exchanged what might have been glances, though it was difficult to tell with their constantly shifting forms. The leader raised what appeared to be a hand, and suddenly the space around them filled with displays of power that should have been impossible. Stars moved in their courses, redirected by mere gestures. Matter transformed from one element to another with casual ease. Space itself seemed to bend and twist according to their will. "Behold our divine power," the leader proclaimed. "We reshape reality according to our desires. We have created worlds and destroyed civilizations with a thought. We are eternal, unchanging, perfect in our divinity." Commander Vasquez crossed her arms, her expression skeptical despite the awesome displays of power surrounding them. "Impressive light show, but power doesn't make you gods. It just makes you powerful." The temperature around them seemed to drop several degrees as the beings' forms flickered with what might have been anger. "You dare question our divinity? We who have ruled this galaxy since before your primitive species crawled from their birthing pools." Captain Chen stepped between her crew and the alien beings, her diplomatic training taking over despite the surreal situation. "We don't question your power or your achievements, but in human culture, respect is earned through actions, not commanded through force. Your species is clearly young and ignorant." Another of the entities spoke, its voice carrying tones of condescension. "Perhaps we will be merciful and simply relocate you to a suitable world where you can worship us properly until your natural lifespan ends." Dr. Webb's eyes lit up with the excitement of discovery. "Actually, if you don't mind me asking, how exactly do your abilities work? The energy manipulation you've demonstrated seems to violate several fundamental laws of physics. As we understand them." The leader of the Eternal Dominion seemed taken aback by the question. "We are gods. We do not explain our divine nature to mortals. Our power simply is, as we simply are." "But surely, even gods must have some underlying principles governing their abilities," Webb pressed on, his scientific mind unable to let the mystery go unsolved. After all, even in human mythology, gods operated according to certain rules and limitations. The beings began to show signs of agitation, their forms flickering more rapidly and their energy output increasing. It was clear that they were not accustomed to having their authority questioned, especially not by beings they considered vastly inferior. Captain Chen recognized the growing tension and decided to take a different approach. "Perhaps we could demonstrate human capabilities in return. We may not have your power, but we have qualities that our species values highly. What could primitive creatures possibly demonstrate to gods?" the leader asked, though there was a note of curiosity in its telepathic voice. "Innovation, adaptation, and the ability to solve problems through cooperation and creativity," Chen replied. "These are the qualities that have allowed humanity to survive and thrive despite our physical limitations." Commander Vasquez nodded in agreement. We've learned that the greatest challenges often require not just power, but the wisdom to know how to use it effectively. The eternal dominion conferred among themselves in rapid bursts of energy that the humans couldn't interpret. Finally, their leader turned back to face them. Very well, mortals. We will indulge your primitive desire to display your capabilities. But when you fail, as you inevitably must, you will acknowledge our divine superiority and submit to our will. Dr. Webb exchanged glances with his crewmates, a plan beginning to form in his mind. What kind of demonstration did you have in mind? A test of capability, the leader declared. We will present you with a challenge that requires both power and wisdom to solve. When you fail, you will understand the futility of opposing divine will. As the alien beings began preparing their test, Dr. Webb discreetly activated his portable scanner, beginning a detailed analysis of the energy patterns surrounding the Eternal Dominion. Something about their power signatures bothered him, something that didn't quite fit with their claims of natural divinity. The stage was set for a confrontation between two vastly different philosophies: the Eternal Dominion's belief in power through dominance, and humanity's faith in strength through understanding and cooperation. Neither side could have predicted how profoundly this encounter would change both their perspectives on what it truly meant to be powerful. The fall of false gods, the challenge presented by the Eternal Dominion, materialized before them as a complex three-dimensional puzzle floating in space. It appeared to be constructed from the same crystalline material as their massive structures, but this one pulsed with unstable energy that made the very air around it crackle with potential. This is the paradox of infinite recursion, the leader of the Eternal Dominion explained, its form glowing brighter with apparent satisfaction. It is a test we have used to humble countless species across the galaxy. The puzzle requires simultaneous manipulation of matter, energy, and dimensional space while maintaining perfect stability. Even the most advanced civilizations have failed. To solve it, Captain Chen studied the floating construct with interest rather than intimidation. The puzzle seemed to shift and change its configuration every few seconds, creating new patterns that defied logical analysis. To most observers, it would appear utterly impossible to solve. "What happens if we succeed?" she asked, though her crew could hear the confidence in her voice that suggested she already had ideas about how to approach the challenge. The being's forms flickered with what might have been amusement. "Success is impossible for non-divine entities. But should you somehow achieve the impossible, we will reconsider our assessment of your species." Dr. Webb had been continuously scanning the aliens and their technology throughout the conversation, and his findings were beginning to paint a very different picture of the Eternal Dominion than the one they presented. "Captain, might I suggest we approach this systematically? After all, every puzzle has an underlying logic, even if it's not immediately apparent." Commander Vasquez nodded in agreement. In military strategy, the most complex problems often have surprisingly simple solutions once you understand the core principles involved. The human team gathered around the puzzle, but instead of immediately attempting to manipulate it directly, they began discussing it among themselves. This collaborative approach seemed to confuse the Eternal Dominion, who were clearly accustomed to seeing other species attempt to solve their challenges through brute force applications of power. "The energy patterns are cyclic," Dr. Webb observed, sharing his scanner readings with his teammates. "Every 17 seconds, the configuration returns to a baseline state before beginning a new variation." Lieutenant Torres, who had been quietly analyzing the data from his portable console, looked up with excitement. "Sir, I think I've found something. The dimensional fluctuations aren't random. They're following a mathematical sequence that repeats every fifth cycle." Captain Chen smiled as she watched her crew work together, each contributing their unique expertise to understanding the problem. "Dr. Webb, what about the material composition? Is there anything unusual about the crystalline structure?" Webb adjusted his scanner settings and took additional readings. "Fascinating. The material appears to be artificially maintained in an unstable state. Without constant energy input, it would naturally settle into a much simpler configuration." The Eternal Dominion watched this process with growing confusion and irritation. "Why do you waste time with this meaningless analysis? Apply your power to the puzzle directly, as every other species has done." "That's just it," Commander Vasquez said, her tactical mind beginning to see the larger picture. "Every other species probably tried to overpower the puzzle instead of understanding it. But what if the solution isn't about applying more force?" Dr. Webb's eyes widened as the pieces began falling into place. "Captain, I believe the puzzle is designed to be unsolvable through direct manipulation. The harder you try to force a solution, the more unstable it becomes. But if you understand the underlying principles, then you can work with the puzzle instead of against it," Chen finished, her respect for her crew's abilities growing even stronger. The team spent the next several minutes mapping out the puzzle's behavior patterns, identifying the mathematical relationships that governed its changes, and developing a strategy that worked with the construct's natural tendencies rather than against them. "All right, team," Captain Chen said finally. "Let's show them what humans can do when we work together." Instead of trying to force the puzzle into a stable configuration through raw power, the humans began making subtle adjustments. At precisely timed intervals, Dr. Webb monitored the energy flows and provided real-time feedback. Lieutenant Torres calculated the optimal timing for each intervention. Commander Vasquez coordinated their efforts with military precision. The Eternal Dominion watched in growing amazement as the puzzle began responding to the humans' approach. The chaotic energy fluctuations gradually settled into more stable patterns. The dimensional distortions smoothed out into elegant geometric forms. Within minutes, the entire construct had achieved perfect stability, glowing with a soft, steady light that indicated complete resolution. "Impossible," the leader of the Eternal Dominion whispered, its form flickering rapidly with what was clearly shock and confusion. Dr. Webb looked up from his scanner with a knowing smile. "Actually, it's quite possible once you understand the principles involved. Which brings me to something I've been wondering about regarding your own abilities." "What do you mean?" another of the beings demanded, though there was now a note of uncertainty in its telepathic voice. "Well, I've been analyzing your energy signatures throughout our encounter," Webb explained, his tone remaining conversational despite the bombshell. He was about to drop, "and I've discovered something fascinating. Your powers aren't divine at all. They're technological. The temperature around them seemed to drop to near absolute zero as the beings' forms began pulsing erratically. You dare suggest that gods require technology?" "I'm not suggesting it. I'm stating it as a scientific fact," Webb continued calmly. "The energy patterns you generate are consistent with extremely advanced nanotechnology integrated directly into your biological systems. You're not manipulating reality through divine power. You're using microscopic machines that can alter matter and energy at the quantum level." Commander Vasquez stepped forward, her hand no longer near her weapon, but her posture still confident. "Which means you're not gods at all. You're just another advanced species that's been using technology to convince others that you're divine. The facade began crumbling rapidly. The Eternal Dominion's perfect, energy-based forms started showing flickers of the biological creatures underneath. Their majestic crystalline structures revealed themselves to be sophisticated technological constructs, impressive but ultimately artificial. Even if that were true, the leader said, though its voice now carried desperation rather than authority, we are still far more powerful than your primitive species. You should still fear us. Captain Chen shook her head, her expression showing pity rather than fear. Power built on deception isn't really power at all. It's just an illusion waiting to be shattered by someone brave enough to ask the right questions. But don't you understand? Another being pleaded, its disguise now completely fallen away to reveal a creature that, while advanced, was clearly biological and mortal. We maintained order in this galaxy for millennia. Species worshipped us, followed our guidance, lived in peace under our rule. Dr. Webb nodded thoughtfully. I don't doubt that your rule brought stability, but it was built on a lie. True leadership comes from earning respect through wisdom and service, not from demanding obedience through false claims of divinity. And now that the truth is out, Commander Vasquez added, what will you do? Continue trying to maintain your illusion, or find a new way to contribute to galactic civilization? The former gods looked at each other, their advanced technology, unable to hide the very mortal confusion and fear in their expressions. They had built their entire civilization around the belief that they were inherently superior, inherently worthy of worship and obedience. We don't know how to be anything other than gods, the leader admitted, its voice now small and lost. Captain Chen's expression softened with compassion. Then perhaps it's time to learn. In human culture, we have a saying, the best leaders are those who serve others. Maybe you could try using your advanced abilities to help other species, not because they worship you, but because it's the right thing to do. The encounter concluded with the former Eternal Dominion agreeing to reconsider their approach to galactic relations. They dismantled their godlike pretenses and began exploring what it might mean to be partners rather than rulers in the cosmic community. As the Horizon's Edge prepared to continue its journey, Dr. Webb made a final log entry about their encounter. Today, we learned that sometimes the greatest courage isn't in facing superior power, but in questioning whether that power deserves the authority it claims. The universe may be vast and full of wonders, but it's not full of gods, just people doing their best to find meaning and purpose among the stars. The human ship disappeared into hyperspace, leaving behind a galaxy where one less species claimed divine authority, and one more had learned that true strength comes not from being worshipped, but from being worthy of respect. Asterisk.